Welcome to a very special edition of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elyachar, the chief content producer and writer of jakestake.com, a pop culture entertainment news website. It is a special edition because the challenge is in the middle of one of the most intense seasons yet. The challenge, double agents. And here to talk with me is the perfect person. He is the co-host of the Challenge Mania podcast, not to mention one of my favorite pop culture commentators and podcast role models. Please help me welcome Scott Yager.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. I'm happy to be here on a very special episode. And Jake, sorry it has taken me so long to finally get on here with you, but happy to be finally doing it.
I'm so happy that we're doing this. So, and also, by the way, you and Derek are my podcast mentors in my head.
Love it. Well, hopefully he and I complement each other well in that regard, and we have imparted wisdom on you both indirectly and directly over the years. But I want to thank you. You've been, so kind about the podcast, and I always see you promoting it. You're always checking in and saying, hi to Lindsay and Brock and everything like that. And I speak for Derek as well. We both appreciate all of it. So yeah, happy to be there for you and any podcasters and people, kind of branching out into this medium. It's something he and I have spent more than enough time acquainting ourselves with. Long before we had the success of Challenge Mania, he and I were both simultaneously failing on our own podcast projects before this. So anything I can impart onto you guys to kind of maybe help save you some of the headaches, I'm always happy to do so.
You're so welcome, Scott. I'm very happy. Next time you see Derek, please tell him I said hello.
I will.
All right, awesome. So, guys, Scott came on to jakestake.com 2 years ago when we corresponded through an email interview because I saw him on our mutual friend, Rob Cesarino's Rob Has a Podcast. Got to give him a shout out as well.
Yep, love him.
And also we actually met during the Big Brother 20 watch party, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Was it Big Brother 20? I think it was a 21 watch party.
21. Why am I mashing seasons together? I apologize about that, guys.
Yeah, but that I know they all blend together for me too. But I remember because because I've been to a couple of Rob's things in New York, and that was the first Big Brother watch party I had gone to of his, and it ended up being like the perfect episode to watch in a jam-packed theater at SVA on 23rd Street. And Kemi, I believe, who is my next guest on Double Trouble, was there. She had been evicted from the house earlier that season, and here she was live as a guest on Rob's podcast. And it was the episode in which, because I remember this pretty vividly, it was the episode in which Jackson got the house to believe that Tommy was lying, and he was doing all this backdoor lying and stuff like that. And it was a crazy episode to watch in front of people. Big Brother's hit or miss. And you could, if you take 100 episodes of Big Brother, probably 80 of them are stinkers. But that was a winning episode to watch. So I remember the day very well.
And I remember that correctly because after that, like literally 5 minutes after the finale, we all roared in delight when we heard that Nicole Anthony, another friend of our mutual podcast, she won HOH.
Yeah, it's so funny. Big Brother has this I feel like if you're like a huge fan of the show, if you're really plugged in, if you're listening to the live feed stuff as it comes in, it's like, there's a show that plays on TV and then there's the show that happens in real time, which we're still in the theater during the Q&A portion. And in real time, of course, in the Big Brother house, they're finishing the competition that we only saw start on TV. And so it's just funny that in a room full of people, all of a sudden you just heard people in the back of the theater just start clapping and whatnot. And it was just so funny. It was like this organic thing, like the first person to get the first bit of info that came out of the live feeds, and then it kind of spread throughout the theater. So that was a fun thing to watch happen in real time.
Awesome. So how has we got to go back to Challenge Mania. So how has Challenge Mania grown over the past 2 years?
Oh, wow. How has it grown? Well, I mean, it has grown exponentially since we started it. It's kind of continued to snowball, and we add and tweak things as we go. But I mean, look, when we started it, it was a podcast, and I'm proud to say that now in 2021, I consider us to be more of a podcast / community / live experience / shop / sort of just kind of a component community to the world of the challenge, and also the kind of, peripheral shows, your Big Brother, your Survivor, stuff like that. Even pop culture gets thrown in. The same way some of, our podcast, quote unquote, role models have become over the years. And, when we first started, the goal was to kind of just churn out content, but now we're looking for things that we can go along with the content. So, hey, you're a big fan of the show. Maybe you can rock a t-shirt. Hey, you like listening to the show. Maybe you'd like watching the show live. Hey, you like one episode of the show on Tuesdays. Maybe you'll like another one on Wednesdays behind a paywall. So we're kind of building as we go. And again, I mentioned before, Derrick and I, are not new to podcasting, although we were new to podcasting being an actual thing we can make a living on. That's what I'm proud to say, is that we have since kind of added all these things on that are mutually beneficial to our listeners and to us, because, happy to say that for the most part, I mean, he and I take part in other projects as well along the way, but for the most part, we're able to make this our focus 365 days a year, which in turn makes it better for everybody who's a part of it. And they feel like we're really putting our heart into it, because we are.
And I'm so proud of you guys, because the coronavirus pandemic threw everybody curveball, because I was so excited for the New York show, because that would be my very first Challenge Mania to attend. But how has Challenge Mania adapted to the way the coronavirus pandemic has gone?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that anyone who was in the podcast business or anything sort of online content related and whatnot, especially people like us who were already doing our product remotely. Derrick lives in West Virginia. I live in New York. We've been social distancing before it was cool or required. So I want to say first and foremost that we were relatively pandemic proof with the core of what we do, the podcast portion, the bonus podcast portion, the show that we cover. Luckily, Herdy had a show in the can that premiered on April 1st, so we got to go right into that. They then, of course, are one of the only shows to shoot during the pandemic and had another season debut in December. So I consider us very lucky in comparison to friends and family and people I read about online who have sports bars that haven't been able to properly open since last March, or, the comedy clubs that we love so much and do our shows at. Here in New York, Caroline's on Broadway, Comedy Cellar, these places have had their doors shut since March. Broadway, live theater, everything like that. Actors who don't already have a cushy gig on a network show, these people have not had any work or very little work for the last year. So for the most part, Derrick and I remained pretty unscathed. I mean, obviously at the beginning of the pandemic, people are, kind of not knowing when their next paycheck's going to come. They don't necessarily know whether or not they have extra funds to subscribe to a podcast, stuff like that. But then became a period where I think people started to kind of settle in and realize, hey, I'm not going to a wrestling event. I'm not going to a basketball game. I have some extra money. Why don't I subscribe to that podcast that's still going on? So, as far as that goes, I think we managed to weather the storm well, but I don't want to take credit for it, because we were in a medium that was perfect for this. We make podcasts that people listen to remotely, every year, not just this year. You saw so many people during the pandemic turn to podcasting. If you look at how many celebrities have a podcast now or an Instagram show. Carmelo Anthony started talking to people about wine on Instagram. John Krasinski started doing a news show out of his basement that got sold for millions of dollars. All these people started kind of using their creative juices for the type of content we were already creating, because that was our business model. So to have gotten a head start on it and already kind of had our toes in the sand with podcasting, we were pretty primed to survive a large chunk of this. But you mentioned the live shows in New York and everywhere we go. We had gotten the ball rolling where we were doing, 6 to 10 live shows a year. Truth be told, we were going to start adding more, not less this year. And that all got wiped clean. We couldn't go anywhere. We had 4 shows on tap that we had already booked travel for, booked guests for, had spent a year planning this big Tampa show the first week of April that we all had to just cancel and refund everybody and everything like that. And these things were something that obviously was good for us and for our business to a certain extent, but also was just such a great mental health boost for me, for Derrick, for our guests, for the cast members who got to see each other if they live on the other side of the world. Maybe we're reconnecting them to the Challenge Maniacs who would become friends from meeting at last shows. And now this is their excuse every few months to get together and see their online friends who otherwise would just be an avatar. But now these are people they hang out with a few times a year. So taking that off the table for hundreds and hundreds of people, myself included, was a real downer and something that really, took a toll on me mentally this past year, coupled with everything that came with the pandemic. I didn't have that thing at the end of the calendar, at the end of the month to look forward to. So that was really sad. And although that didn't make a huge dent in our bottom line. And, it doesn't necessarily mean we were underwater from a business perspective, from just like something that we like to put back into the world and something that I know everyone was looking forward to every month that had really enjoyed becoming a part of this experience with us, for that to have been completely removed. And now we're past the point where our last live show is in Nashville the last week of January 2020. We have not done a live show in a year. And I don't say that to mean that, oh my God, look at all the money we lost. I say that to mean that, like, I genuinely miss these people. So, it took us until July, but finally I bit the bullet and decided to do a monthly Zoom call, which, started to take shape almost immediately. And through month by month, we've kind of gained steam. And what we do with those is, it's a similar thing to the live shows, except everybody who's on the Zoom call, even down to the last patron or maniac, is a part of the Zoom call at all times. There will be times where I ask everybody to mute, but for the most part, everybody's there laughing, asking questions, interacting with the guests. We did a live Hall of Fame ceremony. We did a live award ceremony where we had the people who won the Challenge Mania Awards got to accept the awards live on Zoom. And it's not the same thing as being in a full comedy club and having some cocktails and getting to see people in front of your face and take selfies. But, to put a silver lining on it, we're able to Skype in people from the UK, and we're able to have people who maybe wouldn't be able to come to a live show because they're busy. Like The Miz shows up and does a 10-minute Hall of Fame acceptance speech for us. So, we've managed to kind of move on with the times and kind of do what we can. And I'll admit, like, even when this is hopefully behind us to where we're still doing the live shows again, we'll probably still do the Zooms. Like, that's something I don't think I would have come up with that or even wanted to do that. I probably would have looked at it as like a step backwards. But now seeing how fun it's been and how it's breathed life into our community when they really needed it. It's allowed people who live in communities that we don't necessarily come to. If you live in a smaller town or a state that we don't normally get to, doesn't have a big comedy club scene. So it's like, now it's something that I think will not just supplement the live shows when we can't have them, but will add to that. And will be something maybe we incorporate with the live shows and everything like that. So, this year was super tough on us, as it was with everyone. But I want to say that with a grain of salt, because knowing all the people that were hit really hard financially, emotionally, mentally by this thing, starting in March, and it's still going for them. Like, I'm talking businesses that I used to go to every week that have closed permanently or have not reopened here in New York. In comparison to them, we did and are continuing to do just fine. And that is not something that we deserve credit for. That is just the randomness of having started a podcast business 3 years before podcasting was pretty much the only pandemic-proof business to start.
I agree with you on that. I miss going places so much. And I hope that once everything's over, we could go back and go to shows, and like, I'll be wearing 3 different masks if it's in Kansas City or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, we'll have to see what happens, because such a big part of our live show experience is not just the live stage show. I see a lot of comedians out there going and doing their comedy sets where they're on stage and they're separated from the audience and they do social distancing and then they call it a night. A lot of people have fallen in love with the meet and greet that we do before the show. A lot of people like to come to our after parties. So until that's safe, I don't know that we're going to get back on the road and start doing this again. We'll probably kind of tiptoe into it. There's a version of us and a version of this that could be fishing for places where it's already socially acceptable. I'm looking at you, Tampa. I'm looking at you, Nashville, Kansas City, you name it, where they're already doing this stuff and life is kind of normal. And if you pick the right street corner to look at, you forget you were even living in a pandemic. But here in New York, it's impossible to forget about it. And so since I live here in New York City, I'm kind of going to use that as my gauge. And so the minute of indoor viewing party would be socially and, accepted by not just people, but also by the health professionals here in New York. That's a pretty good sign that it's probably okay to do anywhere. And this might be the first place we do it. Who knows? But so I think we still have a ways to go. But I will say, if you had asked me 3 months ago, I would have been way more pessimistic than I am now that the vaccine's rolling out, now that it seems like there's just a better mentality throughout the country as far as this stuff is concerned. So fingers crossed, at some point during this year, maybe the summer, maybe the fall, we can get back out there doing some fun stuff.
Awesome. So let's talk about, there have been 3 challenges since we last spoke. War of the Worlds 2, Total Madness, and Double Agents. In your humble opinion, what have been some of the major themes that you and Derrick have found were interwoven between all 3 of these seasons?
Okay. So we're talking about War of the Worlds 1 and 2, Total Madness, and now this. So, okay. So if you mean like visually, I think they went with, War of the Worlds 1 was like this kind of desert Mad Maxy theme. War of the Worlds 2 was kind of a jungle. Total Madness was kind of like a post-apocalyptic bunker type deal. And now Double Agents, they're really hitting this James Bond theme hard. I mean, if you look, TJ Lavin, it doesn't say host, it says handler. Like he's handling all these spies, whatever, kind of goofy, but whatever. It's reality TV. So that's the kind of visual motif they've put on all these seasons. Truth be told, I think that kind of elevates the whole show. I think like having people looking for a through line there. Again, it can be kind of funky when you can tell what words they're kind of telling them to say in the interviews and stuff. But I think what it does is it really makes the stuff look and feel very professional, very high rate. So I really like once they started doing that. I think that's been really fun. As far as just like narrative themes that keep coming up on the podcast and whatnot, something that came up kind of in the ether and now has become an actual thing is the idea of, with the casting shifts that have gone on in the last few years, and with the Derricks, my co-hosts, and the Durrells and the Mark Longs and the Landons and the Katie Cooleys and the Trishelles and the Corals and the Tinas of the world, kind of going by way of the dodo bird. And, the people who are left there in the ashes are Johnny Bananas and Anissa and Wes and CT. And for the most part, after them, we're getting 5, 6, sometimes 7 to 10 Big Brother cast members every year. We're getting an influx of Survivor cast members. We're getting a British invasion that took over about 3 to 4 seasons and now is kind of settled. But so I think for a while there was a difference in the people who watch the show every Wednesday, then turn their TV off and then come back next Wednesday, and the real diehard fans of the show that feel an ownership over the show over the course of 36 seasons. Those people, I think, feel a little bit let down when they look at a casting list and they don't see people that they're invested in that they know well. Then there's, of course, the idea that the challenge has evolved to the point where it's now kind of like battle of the reality stars. And it's not all just people that come from Real World and Road Rules. It's people from Big Brother and people from the UK and people from Geordie Shore and Survivor and you name it. And in the middle there, I think, is what we come to every season, which is, hey, if you throw us a couple bones, we'll be happy. This season, we have Teresa returning after quite a long layoff. We have Darrell coming back. Nani came back on War of the Worlds. We hadn't seen her in a while. Wes, same deal. So I think really the thing that constantly comes up is the challenge world accepting or not accepting the Fessies and the Joshes and the Caseys of the world kind of encroaching on their territory and not just coming in for a season or two, but really making a large footprint in the casting pool. And I think that's something that, whether it's people addressing the particular person, we get a lot of people who write in with their feelings about, Josh, or call in with their feelings about Fessy or Casey, or just the overall landscape and saying, oh, I miss this person, or I miss when it was on a beach, or, I miss when the challenge was like this. I think what we are at right now, especially when you throw in the streaming services that allow you to go back and watch the challenge of yesteryear, is kind of the changing of the times. People who are clinging to those old times and just for dear life saying, please, please, please do not give me more Big Brother. I want more of the old stuff. And the people who are accepting the new ways that the challenge is upgrading from a production standpoint, from a budgetary standpoint, and also evolving from a casting standpoint as well.
All righty. So while we're on the subject of certain people, I wanted to talk to you about some of the major players who've been absent for a while and why they should be back and why they should return.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. We got to start with two major people off the top of my head, Cara Maria and Paulie Calafieri. They were last seen on War of the Worlds. I think by fans were enough with them by Total Madness, but now they're really wanting to see, some of them have been wanting to see Paulie and Cara Maria back. Is there a probability that we'll see both of them back since they were heavy hitters during the War of the Worlds saga?
It's tough to say because I don't know what is keeping them from being on the show. And typically, once that happens, once it's kind of like a non-obvious thing, I'm no wiser than you or anybody why they haven't been brought back. I think for a while there was maybe, hey, she needed a season off or, just to kind of mental health, just kind of take a breather. Maybe they only wanted both of them. Rumors had been rampant that Paulie wasn't getting along with everybody on the show. But for a show that's built on conflict, I don't know why that would be the end all be all. So, you kind of have to believe half of what you hear and then kind of put your own goggles on. And the way I see it is now we're getting to the point where, I know they both want to be back. I don't know if that's in any circumstances or if they only want to come back and play together. But regardless, last I've spoken to either one of them, it seemed like they both wanted to play on, say, this last season, especially during a pandemic. I can't imagine anyone's turning down a vacation, in quotes, to Iceland in the middle of a year where I can't even go, to Borders or Barnes & Noble, and you're going to Iceland. So this was probably a tough one to not get the final call for. And truth be told, I don't know what the magic sauce is going to be. If you ask me, it's like, never. To me, I always say never say never. And I say never in wrestling. I say never in reality TV, because it's not like either of them were involved in or did anything themselves, something that's just like a put them on a no-call list. So, I mean, I think maybe it's a chemistry thing, whether that's with people behind the scenes, whether that's with people who are still very much a part of the show. I don't know, but those all seem like issues that could be alleviated one way or another. I think as this show evolves and as it, breeds new, spin-offs and, goes on to different networks. You saw the challenge pop up on Netflix recently. There's going to be more and more reasons to get people involved, not just in this show, but different versions of the show or different crossovers with other shows. Paulie, of course, very much a part of the Big Brother world. His brother just won Big Brother. So, I mean, if you put a gun to my head, a saying that Lindsay hates, but put a gun to my head and said, do we see them again? I say yes. But you also, if you ask me, what's it going to take? I have no idea.
All righty. We got to talk about Laurel because she lost against Ninja. And I think newer fans like myself were very impressed by her.
Laurel. Yeah. So, Laurel is just all-time challenge beast, just a physically imposing person who's, equally as mentally imposing. She will break you mentally before you even go out there against her. Unfortunately, she's one of our white whales of the podcast. We've never had her on. She's definitely had her issues with other cast members like Cara Maria along the way. She's a very popular cast member, whether she's popular in that people like her or they like rooting against her. I think she's someone who's great for the show. There's no reason, in my opinion, why she shouldn't be on the show. I know that she did a spinoff. I believe she was on the X on the Peak show, which is a dating show. I think a way that they kind of like to keep people on MTV, even if it's not on the challenge. You've seen challengers, turn up there when they're on a bit of a challenge hiatus. So, truth be told, I don't know her personally. And, if anyone has a reason to root against her, it's me, considering she doesn't come on the podcast and I think still has me blocked on Twitter. But I think she's great for the show and I'd love to see her again. But, because of where I sit and proximity wise to her very far, I have no idea what her story is. I don't know if she's been getting asked or getting, turning down calls, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw her back sometime soon. I think they really like her. She seems like somebody who, whenever she is on the show, she gets promoted very heavily. They use her in a lot of logos and a lot of stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I do not think we've seen the last of Laurel by any means.
Okay, I got to bring in a new guy, a fan favorite that we've been waiting a while. Turbo, unfortunately, last time we saw him, it took 6 security guards to at least tie him down from not kicking Jordan in the butt.
Yeah, he's someone I also would not be shocked if we never saw again. I think he might end up being a 2-season experiment type guy. He is someone that I have had a little bit of chance to get to know very briefly, albeit, but I did spend a couple days with him in San Francisco. He was out here in the States in Los Angeles around the time we did our San Francisco live show. So I was able to make it happen where we brought him up. And he, to me, is one of the few cast members I've been around, and I've been around a lot of cast members, and I speak highly of all of them. I like all of them, and a lot of them, a very high percentage of them, have a magnetism about them and have a star-like feature to them and quality to them, and especially around challenge fans, they all feel like movie stars to a certain degree. But he's the one guy that I really got and a bit of it is like the danger, some of it's the language barrier. But he comes in, he's got these big sunglasses on, and I just felt like I was hanging out with Jean-Claude Van Damme or something like that. He just had this aura to him that I don't know that I felt around anybody else on the show. If I had to think of a few people, sure, but he just has this awesome quality to him that I don't think they've been able to find anywhere else on the planet. And, it makes sense because the guy's got this martial arts background. He comes from Turkey, definitely a different culture over there, both in real life and on television. He won Survivor Turkey twice, which is like, to me, Survivor US is tough. I imagine Survivor Turkey equally, if not tougher. And so I think, he comes in, he wins War of the Worlds. He comes into a War of the Worlds 2, has a War of the Words with Jordan, which ends up being the end of his season. But if I had to guess, he's got a lot going on. He's often like filming movies, and he's a huge megastar over there in Turkey and in different parts of that area of the world. And I just don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they thought, hey, you know what? Let's put this experiment behind us. Is it worth the hassle? And I wonder if casting a guy like Nam is sort of filling that void. The guy who has a bit of an accent, little bit of a language barrier, very stoic, athletically gifted, and maybe Nam is like an easier to deal with version of Turbo. Not to say he wasn't a delight, and just by the little I dealt with him, he is a delight, and I'm sure he was great. But just in the moment with Jordan and the fight, and like just not even saying the magic words that would get him put back in the house, he kind of verbally checked out of that season just by never not saying I will kill him. And that's the problem there. You got to know when to tone it down to a little bit. And that's what's so good most of the time about like a Devon or a Paulie or a Josh, is that they know how to get to that apex level of argument and then tone it down without crossing the ultimate line. Whereas Turbo, it seems like he was so genuinely offended by the disrespect, and he wasn't used to the knowing where the line is and not crossing it. And I feel like, over the years, they've definitely upped the security over the years. They've changed the way that they've highlighted fighting on the show. I think that they might view him as being too much of a wild card to be worth the risk. But that's me guessing. Again, someone we could definitely see back, especially if they ever did like a champion season or something like that, because he's one of the only recent modern day single winners here. But I just think he's got so much going on. He doesn't need it. I wouldn't be shocked if we never saw him again, or only saw him maybe once or twice again down the road.
I agree. Speaking of which, we got to give a big shout out to new dad Theo Campbell.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I know. And also, fans have now been saying, we want Theo back. His eyes are clear, but I'm surprised that he wasn't on Double Agents.
Yeah, that's another one. I don't know. Do not ask me about the physical standards and the testing and the this and that and how it affects insurance. I really have no idea. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Because, with that, I think it'd be as great of a story as ever to see a guy who, comes back from being, legally blind. Now, the thing is, he still says, if you read his post, he's never going to have full vision back in his eye. Now, should people without full vision in both their eyes be disqualified for competing on the challenge? I don't necessarily think so. I'm sure there's a lot of sports you could play if you were still good enough at them. With the challenge, with the reality TV landscape, though, there's a thing about being able to insure cast members. And with the level of stunts that they do, it's one of those things where I don't know if it's possible to insure him for the show with the injury that he has. They do so much stuff where you're flying through the air and whatnot, and the moving vehicle, this and that. It's like, could he get a job operating a crane? You know what I mean? Maybe not. And I think that might be the bar for the behind the scenes insurance aspect of it. I don't know whether that's the case. And I don't know, he might be passing a physical to do 9 out of 10 things, but the 10th thing is the challenge. He might also be able to pass the physical for the challenge, but insurance is like, yeah, we'll insure him, but it's $500,000 or whatever, So I don't know what the story is there. I'd love to see him back. He's one of my favorite cast members in the last few seasons. He's been great on the podcast every time we've had him on. I think he's an elite athlete, came in second on that really hard season Turbo one. So I really, really hope, fingers crossed, we could see him again, especially now he's got the kid to play for at home. Who knows if that's going to kind of keep him, busy for the next few years at least. But, we've seen it before when people have a kid, they come and they have even more of a chip on their shoulder and something more to play for. And Lord knows the editors like putting the interview clips in there where people remind us that they have a kid at home that they need money for now. So I really hope we see him. But just having worked in reality TV a little bit myself, I feel like that type of injury might be hard for a type of show like The Challenge with so many different things you have to have people signed off for.
All right, so speaking of coming in with playing for kids, I'm talking about Devon, because Devon will be a Big Brother 22, and she did that much better. But now fans are saying, okay, we want to see that same intensity and have her come back on the challenge. Is Devon done with the challenge?
You know what? Your guess is as good as mine. I love Devon. I thought she was great on Big Brother. I think she'll be great on the challenge again. Would not be surprised if we see her back again. Never say never makes a lot of sense for her. I don't know timing. Look, she obviously decided to do Big Brother this summer. And that obviously took her out of the running for this last season of the challenge. If I had to guess, it also makes her a must get for the next challenge that she'll agree to do. You know, getting that profile back out there on Big Brother, winning America's favorite house guest. So, you know, I think whenever she says yes again, she'll be back on the challenge. She's still super young. I really do think we definitely see Devon in some capacity on a challenge season. I really do.
All right, we got to talk about two new parents as well. Relatively new, but they were all on the same season together, Are You One? And also their friendship fell apart during the challenge, but now they reconnected again on social media. I'm talking about Hunter Barfield and Amanda Garcia, two big power players when it comes to the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, look, Hunter is someone I know wants to come back. Truth be told, I don't know if he's sort of, I don't want to say been replaced by Fessy, but I wonder if like someone like Fessy, athletic, young, getting in the mix with the Nelsons of the Coreys of the world, if he's kind of taken Hunter's spot. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case. I hope not. I love Hunter. I consider him a friend. I really want to see him back on the show. Same token, Amanda, I don't know her personally. Again, someone who's avoided the podcast very purposely. I think she's great. I think she's, you know, great TV. I think she's great for the show. I think she's unpredictable. And again, now she's a mom, and I think this is an unfair double standard, but it is, like it or not, a lot harder for a mom, especially a single mom, to leave their kid to go film a show for X amount of time than it is for a dad. Now, I don't know the specifics of their situations and how easy it would be for either of them to get on the show, but I certainly hope that both of them are given another chance, because I think both of them were great on the show, and I hope it's not true that, you know, so much new blood has been breathed into the show since they last played that you know, Amanda's positions are being filled by, you know, your Lolos and your Ambers and your, you know, the Brits that have come in, the Georges of the world and people like that. I hope we get to see her again, and I hope it happens. And I'd love to see her out there as a new mom. I'd love to see how that affects her personality, her tenacity, things like that. And Hunter, I just feel like is getting an unfair shake, man. I every time they cook up a new cast, I'm hoping to see Hunter on it. And I hope that that's not the end of the road for him, because I think he is perfect for that show. I think he especially, like, to me, he's someone who would have fit in so great on the earlier seasons of the challenge. Like he's like the physicality of a Derrick mixed with the personality of an Ace, if that makes any sense. So I really like both those people for different reasons, and hoping, fingers crossed, it's not the end for them. And I think there will be enough formats coming down the pike that allows them to come back. So I'm still going to say never for either of them too.
All right, because recently they brought back people such as Nani and Wes and Anissa and Laurel and Teresa. I decided to go into the challenge gloss yearbook and pick out two people that I think would be interesting to see with this new cast. So let me start with a friend of yours, Emily Schramm.
Okay. Well, sorry. Say the question one more time.
Like Emily Schramm, do you think I know she's a friend of the Challenge Mania podcast. Mm-hmm. Do you think there would be interest in seeing her play again?
You know, she's, again, has so much going on. She runs her own business. I know I wouldn't be surprised to see her turn up on like a Champs versus Stars, a We Want OGs, a spinoff type thing where it's a little bit more contained. And also they maybe allow her to, you know, put her feet in the business waters a little bit from afar. But what I'll also say is the same thing I'll say for Emily, I'll say for a lot of people. The pandemic landscape changes a lot of answers in this regard. You see a lot of people who change what, like in a given year, someone like a Wes or someone like an Emily who are running all these businesses and have all these meetings and these live coaching sessions they're doing. When that goes away and you don't have to be in person as much, it's a lot easier to leave for even 6 weeks and kind of have somebody handle your stuff. And so Emily's someone who, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said probably not for a full-on season. But I think if they caught her for the next one, and I don't know how things have evolved over there in Denver since the pandemic. You know, I know that here in New York it hasn't changed much. But, you know, assuming it's similar there and she still kind of has her hands tied when it comes to a lot of the aspects of her business, I wouldn't be shocked. So I think a lot of people want to see her again. I think she fits in well with these new ladies they brought in, the Lolos and the Natalies and the Jennies of the world. I'd love to see her go out there against some of them because she's competed against some tough competition, the Cooks and the Caras and the Laurels of the world. But I think this next level that they've brought in, I would love to see them against an Emily Schramm or a Laurel or a Cara, to be honest with you, and just see how that shakes out.
One final person that a lot of people will find polarizing, I got to have him in because we don't have a lot of LGBT community representatives. It's Dr. Frank Fox, a.k.a. Frank Sweeney.
Yeah, I mean, I love Frank, and Frank's always great when we have him on the podcast. I'd love to see him again. I don't know whether that's somebody they're not calling for whatever reason, but yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think they go into the OG, and I know he was on a later season of The Real World, but I consider Frank an OG. I don't think they go into the OG, and this is going to be a very long acronym, the OG LGBTQ plus community well enough. That's something I'd love to see Tyler. I'd love to see Ryan Kehoe back. I'd love to see Shane play more. I'd love to see Frank. I'd love to see Rachel Robinson if they can get her to agree to do it. That's something I don't see as much as I would like. And I don't know what the reason is. But, Frank, of course, as I said, not necessarily the oldest Real Worlder, but somebody who did play on the second season of Real World San Diego, or appear on that season, I should say, has a history with some of the people still playing, Johnny's and Zach's and whatnot. So I'd love to see him back out there. I know he was just hanging out with Ashley in Austin. They took some pictures and posted him. So I mean, sign me up for Frank anytime. I wouldn't hold my breath. I don't know. I think he's more of probably a fit for the OG show if they end up doing multiple seasons of that. But, I just think that, personally, he's someone I would have went to even sooner than now. I would have went to him, for maybe the spot that, they gave Laurel on this last season, or, put him on the, Team USA team of War of the Worlds 2, something like that.
And I believe Bananas brought him up saying that he was one of his worst partners, but to have Bananas and Frank if Bananas decide to play again.
Yeah. I mean, look, again, when you bring someone back like a Frank, or in this season, a Teresa, it's great to have some through line narratives already existing. So like Teresa, bringing her back this season was perfect because she's got the history with Nani, the history with Leroy, the history with Darrell, the history with Wes, So there's a lot there. There's a lot to hang on to there. And then, of course, she develops relationships along the way with some of the new rookies and how she gets along with the Cams of the world and this and that. And you got a lot going on. To bring back a Frank into a season where there's nobody that he knows or played with, I think would be kind of a waste. So I would bring him back on a season where you have Johnny who can help kind of tell the story of Frank along with Frank, of course, and then anybody he meets along the way.
Awesome. We got to talk about some of the news stories that have dominated some headlines regarding some of the stuff. And I want to see what the Challenge Mania's approach. So over the past couple of months, we've seen Viacom CBS expelled D from the series. You had Jordan Weasley and Tori Deal's broken engagements. You had Zach Nichols viciously attack Amanda Garcia on Twitter. You had Brad Firenze and Tori Hall's custody battle. And not to mention the fact just recently, the Stephen Bear, Georgia Harrison alleged revenge porn incident. So how does Challenge Mania approach those tough news stories? And do you and Derrick risk anything speaking on these issues?
Well, do me and Derrick. I mean, so me and Derrick are in kind of two different boats. Derrick is very much still kind of, and always will be, a member of the MTV Challenge family officially. He was on the show. He has a relationship to the show. They still very often go back to him, whether it's to do an after show or a spinoff or a Universal Studios special or whatnot. They're still very much connected. You see him show up in best of videos all the time. And likewise, not just having a relationship with the show, he has a very personal relationship with a lot of the cast members, some of which you just named. So it's not as, and along the way, by doing the podcast, yes, I have a relationship with them too, but I'll never pretend to say that it's as much of a bond as the one that he has with these people personally, and also being able to relate to them as TV personalities. So, you named a bunch of different situations there. I think they're all kind of different. You mentioned like a custody battle between, two cast members. That's never going to be something we cover. And truth be told, that wouldn't have been something we covered regardless if it took place between two of our friends or not. When you throw that in, of course it's off limits. But even if it was a custody battle going on between cast member A and B that Derrick and I have never even met, we're probably not going to cover that on the podcast. That just doesn't really seem like the stuff that we're interested in, although I understand a segment of our audience might be interested in it. There's a fair amount of places they can click around and find the gossip on that or the stew on that if they want. It doesn't need to be on our show. When there's stuff that is, the cancel material, when you have people talking about something somebody said or whatnot, we kind of, I think what we do is We don't necessarily shy from it. I think we try to handle it responsibly, especially if people ask about it, especially if we have a cast member on the show that's been involved with it. We try to handle it in a way that we think they would find appropriate. And we don't want them, and when I say them, I mean, the challenge world, and that includes the cast members themselves and the challenge gods and everything. We don't want them to think that we're fishing for it, that we're digging for it, that it's our business to kind of shine a light on the negative aspects of the people who make the show or the people who are on the show. There are some incidents that come up that either, readers and listeners write in about when it comes to questions or call in with voicemails about, and we'll choose whether or not to address them. But it's one of those things where you kind of can choose what your podcast is for and what it's about. And to us, we're about covering what's on the show, what affects the show. When it comes to the personal lives of the cast members on the show, a lot of that ends up bleeding into the show. When a CT or a Tori or a Jordan or whoever comes back on the show and starts talking in interviews about their personal life, then it becomes part of the show. The stuff that ends up, being people on the internet reading through the tea leaves of Instagram posts and this and that and wondering if this person's getting divorced from this person, that's when we kind of stay out of it, because these are people, again, that have been good to us. They come on the podcast. We might want to ask them to come on the podcast again. A lot of them are good friends with Derrick and have been for years. And it just wouldn't be cool to go out of our way to draw negative attention to something that they don't necessarily want, just so we can get like a few more listeners out of it. And so, I think the one that you mentioned that is something that we did cover briefly, was the bear thing, and that was sort of just to kind of talk about it as a news story. Again, nothing that we're kind of making up or bringing into the ether. We're just kind of putting it out there. This is something in the news the other day when he was, arrested for the video thing with Georgia, and we kind of talked about it briefly. And sometimes when things like that happen, we will discuss them. Now, that doesn't mean that anytime someone gets a DUI, we're going to bring it up on the show. Anybody who's listening to our show who would be interested in that probably already knows via Reddit or something like that. And I think part of what comes with having a cast member as a co-host is he's not only been through a lot of this stuff. I'm not saying he's been through the DUIs and stuff, but I'm saying he's been through what it's like to have people talking about you at all times. And thus he knows that we don't need to be the 10th outlet or the 10th person getting on or harping on an issue that somebody's having personally, whether it's their relationship or whether it's some trouble they got in and stuff like that. So we treat it on a case-by-case basis. We certainly do not have sort of a hard, fast rule. Of course, if a guest wants to come on and talk about something, we let them talk about it. Often if a guest asks us afterwards, hey, you know what, I talked about that thing, I'd kind of rather you take it out, we let them, because that's just not what we're in the business of. We're not Reality Steve. We're not trying to like bring you the most insider information that you're not going to get anywhere else, that we're going to get sued over, and whether it's true or not. And that's just not what we do. You might get a little bit of that from our show. And there's sometimes guests that come on and they say things that are really interesting and whatnot. But to me, there's a different business model where you're going, you're looking for that stuff. And that's not to say that I'm not in a way interested in it and I don't read it and I don't find out about it, but it's just not what we choose to make our show about, because once you make it about that stuff, that's what it becomes. And then the other stuff, we're talking about the show. We're talking about the great moves they made. We're talking about that blind side. We're talking about the elimination. All that pales in comparison because, that's not even real life stuff. What do I care about that? I want to hear about someone going to jail. I want to hear about someone getting divorced. And it's like, that's just not really what we're talking about. I know that's why some people watch reality TV, because it gives them an excuse to judge and watch people from that other angle and feel okay about it. But that's not why we watch it.
I totally agree with you on that. I want to change subject to make a better news, because you and Derrick released your Halfway Point podcast for the Double Agents. I encourage all of you to check it out. And I know that you've done an hour and 10 minutes on that. So could you briefly say some of your favorite parts of Challenge Double Agents so far?
Yeah, so I mean, look, this season could have been a stinker, and I'd still be enjoying it because, like I said, it just landed right in the middle of this pandemic where I could use the content, and we could definitely use the stuff to talk about on the podcast. But I think even in a vacuum, in a regular year, this has been a really great season. I thought that the cast they put together was super fun. Couple tweaks I would have made, couple omissions, and people who we don't see that I'm a little bit disappointed to not see either of the champions from last season come back and defend their crown. But other than that, getting to see Teresa again, and not just Teresa, but Teresa making waves and making enemies semis and making big moves. I absolutely love it. I love seeing Darrell back. I think it's so cool that Lolo Jones, who just won a world championship in bobsledding the other day, by the way, congrats to Lolo Jones, is out here competing on her first full season of the challenge. The thing looks amazing. If I can't go on vacation for 4 years, at least I could watch them in a gorgeous location. So, I mean, some of the I go back and forth on the house drama. I think this type of house drama has been okay. The arguments between Josh and Devon and the Big Brother sucks and all that stuff has been pretty fun to watch. Kyle and Devon have been good comic relief. I think Fessy's really stepped up as the main villain of this season. And I think when you have a villain like him, who's kind of like a Darth Vader or a Kane or an Undertaker, who's going to be tough to take down on top of the fact that he's becoming a villain, I think is really cool. We haven't had that in a while on the challenge. And so I really do think this is set up to be a really great season down the stretch. Some really quintessential favorites of the show are for the first time, I think, in a really long time, if not ever, are running the game. You have a guy like Leroy who was just so beloved. Can he finally win his championship? We would love to see that. Same goes for Anissa on the female end. Of course, you have them both tethered to two second-year returning players in Casey and in Fessy, who look like they're just one good break away from winning a challenge championship. So a lot of fun stuff still out there. Of course, season ended early for Natalie Anderson. You never like to see that, but Lolo Jones still in the game. Nam's still in the game. Amber B from Big Brother still in the game. Amber M is still kicking in there. So I think it's really fun, and I think the possibilities are endless. I think that, we lost some of the veterans at the beginning of the show, Ashley and Wes and whatnot, but you still have CT there behind the radar. You never want to give up on CT and forget about him. Him and Big T have just been gold. I just love their chemistry and the way they chat and have their little meetings and stuff like that. So, and there's no toxic energy on the season, which, I think some people like that for the show. Some people like having people that they truly hate and love rooting against. But I think that, similar to Total Madness, where you kind of felt like the house kind of just had a vibe where, although, you're going to have your issues, you're going to have your fights, you're going to have your fire extinguisher moments and whatnot, but everyone kind of respected each other. And that's what I get from this one. And I think it bleeds through the screen and you get it too. And you begin to, respect the overall product similarly as well. So aces all around for me. I really like it.
I'm glad to hear it. So during the last time we corresponded, Scott, you gave me a list of people that you want to join the challenge family. Has your list changed? And if yes, who would you like to bring over from like Survivor and Big Brother and see to compete?
Well, some of the people I named have since come over, right? So I think, I looked over when you sent it to me. I think I said Jay was someone who I wanted to see come over. I forget if I said Natalie, but Natalie has since come over. And I'll be honest, Natalie may have been a little bit further from my consciousness back then. And now, of course, gets to ride this, second place finish on Winners at War right into a challenge. I think everybody realized she'd be perfect. Similarly, and I think I probably maybe had named her the first time, but I'll name her again, is Michelle Fitzgerald, someone who, again, really got a lot of shine on Winners at War. And I think if you weren't sold on her as a potential challenger last time, I think after that season, it'd be great to see her. If they do some sort of an X's season or something, I think you could bring in Wendell too. I think, Wendell and Dom had this great, chemistry running the game in their first season of Survivor. And I didn't necessarily look at Wendell that way, but this season, I don't know if it was the him and Michelle stuff, but coming off of Winners at War, Wendell really stood out to me as somebody who I'd love to see on the challenge too. So I'll go them on the Survivor end. And then on the Big Brother end, I mentioned her before. She's my next guest on Double Trouble. I love Kemi from Big Brother 21. I think she'd be great to have on a future season. Not for any reason other than in the Big Brother world, I don't think there needs to be necessarily this big physical translation of, they dominated on Big Brother, so they'll be good on the challenge. Big Brother is such a differently constructed show. The challenges on that show are so goofy that I think it's more about the personality and it's more about the way that they would transfer into the social dynamic of the challenge that stands out to me. And that's why you've seen people that didn't necessarily, jump off the screen as oh my God, get this guy onto the challenge on Big Brother. But when you move them onto the challenge, they do really well, like a Paulie or a Jose, and I think that I would love to see Kemi from that world as well. Someone else who I'd love to see, who I think he was on Big Brother 20 with Fessy and with Casey, was Scotty Salton. I know I mentioned him the first time. I'd love to see him. I know that as seasons go by, you wonder, has the ship sailed? But Amber from Big Brother 16, that you would have thought that was a season too far to draw from. And here she is showing up and still very much in the game on Double Agents. So those are a couple people. I wasn't really impressed with this last season of Big Brother All-Stars. So there wasn't too many people from that season that I thought, give me them. On recent seasons of Big Brother, people who I think might make the transition well, Rachel Swindler, I think would be good. I like Caitlin Herman. I don't know how well she would last on the challenge, but I think occasionally it's fun to put someone on there who would be truly scared, and I think she would be. And then someone who, again, I think might be problematic for a few reasons, but I thought, and we had him on the podcast, who I thought might be good for a future season of the challenge is Brett from Big Brother. I believe he was on 20 as well. Yeah, and he's someone who I think maybe again is a little bit too much for the old challenge mold, and maybe not really fitting in with the current challenge culture. But I think he'd be good, and I think he'd be a potential villain as well. I think the ladies would like him quite a bit too. And then to go off grid, and this is a show that I think some people watched towards the beginning of the pandemic, but they haven't really talked about lately. But there was the show called The Circle that was on Netflix that I found to be quite interesting. And there was a couple people from that show that I thought would be interesting for the challenge or Big Brother. I know you're asking for the challenge, but I think these people would have been good on Big Brother. But the one that really jumped out at me was this girl, Sammy. I think she'd be good for either the challenge or for Big Brother. So it'd be interesting knowing that they do have a bit of a working relationship with Netflix, and The Circle is an original Netflix property. Maybe they begin to do a little bit of a crossover there too.
I also been thinking about some people that you've had on your shows. I'm surprised that Tommy Sheehan hasn't been called yet.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think for me, it's funny because Tommy, big challenge fan, but said that, as a fourth grade teacher, that'd be a hard sell. So that's why he went for Survivor. And similarly, I think that's the other thing is I don't know. And the challenge has grown up a lot. It's not as much about the hookups and the scantily clad beachwear and whatnot. So I don't know that it'd be impossible, but it'd be pretty hard to simultaneously be a fourth grade teacher and a challenger. So that's pretty tough. And as far as him not getting the call, I'm not surprised because it sucks because, Tommy's such a great guy and he played a pretty damn good game on that season of Survivor. But I do believe that's probably going to be a forgotten season of Survivor, not just from CBS and returning all-star Survivor seasons, but also potentially by the challenges of the world who just won't want to go back and revisit that season of Survivor, even if by proxy. So sadly, I think that's another thing standing in Tommy's way as far as future appearances on shows is that's kind of a season of Survivor that I think everybody involved kind of just wishes never happened.
So that sounds like, I got to say, you picked a really good group of people.
Thank you. I think that over the past few years, I've started to sort of grasp what they're looking for with these crossover people from Big Brother and from Survivor. There's not necessarily too much rhyme or reason to it. And just when I think I get it, they go and do something that I would not have thought of. But I do think, and I could be wrong, but, as far as like just seeing who, because if you had initially asked me, they're going to go for the winner every time, they're going to go. And then I kind of see, oh no, they don't care. They're okay with going somebody who finishes 8th or 13th or whatever, as long as they're good for the challenge, and that's not to say they haven't pulled a couple winners in along the way, but Casey and Josh, I don't even think it's as much about them winning as it is their personalities and how much they fit in the show. And Josh, is a very polarizing cast member. A lot of challenge fans are not the biggest fans. And I think that's what makes him great. I think that among the people that you've put on the show in the last 5 years, is there somebody who more people have an opinion of, even if some of them are negative, than Josh? No. So, I hope some of those people end up on the challenge. Let's talk in another year and see if any of them made the jump.
Agreed. Also, we got to talk about you guys. I got to say, Challenge Mania was beating the drum in helping Mark Long, playing a significant role in helping Mark Long launched your We Want OGs campaign. So what did it mean to you and the Challenge Mania community when it was announced that there will be a show highlighting the Challenge OGs?
Well, I don't know that it's been officially announced per se, but yes, there's definitely something in the works. And, there's definitely, I think sometimes you got to remember what's been announced by the internet and what's been announced formally. But look, I think everybody knows that the thing's working in the right direction. And here's what I'll say is I've never, in my years of working in reality TV, following reality TV, covering it with the challenge, I've never seen something go from like a viral internet campaign to an actual show that's going to happen in less time. And a lot of that has to do with the pandemic. A lot of that has to do with you guys and people listening and on the internet and using the hashtag We Want OGs and stuff. And again, it goes to show it's like the success of our podcast, the success of what we do with the live shows, the success with a lot of the merch that we sell in the store, it's a proof of concept that there's a lot of people out there who love and care about these people who haven't even been on the show in 5, 10, sometimes 15 years. So, Mark Long did a really good job kind of shepherding all that together, putting it all in one place, taking it to the powers that be. And finally they bit and they realized, there is something to do here. And a thing that comes with it also is we're in a different TV landscape than we used to be in. You know what I mean? Like doing something as a one-off, doing something as a spin-off, doing something as kind of a, hey, we don't even have a place for this yet. All this is something that, 5 years ago wouldn't have made sense. It's going to be on MTV at 10. If not, then we're not going to do it. But when you have the, the Netflixes of the world and the Paramount Pluses of the world and the HBOs of the world and Amazon and everybody buying content and MTV and online and, like MTV now does an after show for the challenge that runs on YouTube. A couple of years ago, that would have felt like a downgrade. Like, oh, what happened? Now it doesn't matter. Half people watch everything on YouTube. I know a bunch of people watch the Super Bowl probably on YouTube. So with everything kind of bleeding together and mediums like podcasting and YouTube shows and streaming all becoming the norm, I think it opens the doors for things to kind of happen a lot easier than they would have with all the red tape that it would have taken to get something on MTV in prime time 5 years ago, if you're not Rob Dyrdek watching YouTube videos on ridiculousness. So, for whatever reason, whatever happened this year, it was the magic sauce. I think a lot of things happened this year in the world of TV, entertainment, politics, sports. A lot of things happened because of the specifics of the pandemic and the dynamic of having everyone at home, everyone online, everybody wanting to root for something positive. And this is one of the things that came from it, was that in the middle of this pandemic, when everybody wanted something to root for, wanted to be a part of something, this We Want OGs movement really took hold. And here we are, whether or not it's been officially announced or unofficially announced. I mean, here we are. It looks like we're on the precipice of it becoming a real thing. And that is as much a part of the times. It's as much a part of the changing culture and TV landscape and everything like that. But it's also, look, to put a silver lining on it, I do not think that in 2019 or in a pandemicless 2020, this thing gets off the ground the way it did. So, hey, not to say we would trade a pandemic and having to stay home a year for a We Want OG season, but this is something that came from the unfortunate circumstance that we all just went through.
Awesome. So we got to start wrapping things up. So why should my audience check out Challenge Mania?
Oh, man. Well, if you like the challenge, you should be listening to Challenge Mania. We do long-form interviews with cast members. During the season, they tend to be cast members that are on the season, but we also like to squeak in an OG interview from time to time. During the off-seasons, a lot of them tend to be OG interviews, or at least cast members who necessarily weren't on that season. We also do Double Trouble. It's our bonus show over at patreon.com/challengemania. That's our weekly recap show. That's if you get done watching the challenge on Wednesday night and you want to hear a podcast that night or the next morning when you're going to work, that's what you want to get over there. And that's kind of a different model. The long form interviews are meant to be listened to at any time, whereas the Double Trouble interviews or the Double Trouble recaps, you probably only want to listen to while you're watching that week's episode. So look, it's as simple as this. If you like the challenge, you probably love Challenge Mania. I recommend checking it out. If it's not for you, luckily there are dozens of other challenge podcasts as well. A lot of them are good. Most of them are good. Hell, all of them are good. I haven't even had a chance to listen to all of them, but I'm pretty sure all of them are pretty damn good. So even if you get tired of the sound of my voice or whatever it is, if you don't like Challenge Mania, what's great is in 2021, there are so many challenge podcasts, yourself included, who covers the challenge in addition to other shows as well. There are so many places to go to get that junk food for people who are obsessed with reality TV or specifically the challenge like I am, to get that extra junk food late at night, early in the morning, afternoon, whenever you want to do it. So it's a great time to be alive and to be a challenge maniac.
Awesome. So first of all, Scott, where can I connect with you on social media, and where can they listen to the Challenge Mania episodes?
Okay, so if you want to get Challenge Mania, the regular podcast, you go to challengemaniapodcast.com. That will take you to Spreaker. You can follow us on there. You can get the Spreaker app, or you can get us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. Just put in Challenge Mania. You'll see the logo. Derek and I are on it. It's easy to find. You can get us anywhere, 100% free. If you want to get our Patreon show, it's patreon.com/challengemania. The Maniac level is what gets you the podcast every Wednesday. But if you're at a lower level, we do some extra bonus shows over there too. I do a voicemail show called Call Me Mania that all patrons get. We do a lot of weekly giveaways and other fun stuff, fantasy contests over there too. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Challenge Podcast. You can find me specifically on Twitter at Shot of Yager. That's Yager. And then on Instagram, I am at Scott of Yager, same Yager. And I haven't figured out how to use Clubhouse or TikTok yet. So that'll be it.
Awesome. By the way, I'm jealous of the Clubhouse because I would love to be down there sometime. But however, I cannot wait to see what you guys do. So anyway, guys, to download episodes of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar podcast, head to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Spreaker. Just type in Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. And also, are you on social media? Because I'm on social media too. Subscribe to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Now, the JakesTake.com is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. So head over to JakesTake.com to read my original interview with Scott and all my other articles and reviews. Scott, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with me. I really appreciate it. You are awesome. I'm so happy for all of Challenge Mania success. And please tell Derrick I said hello.
I will. Thank you so much for having me. Keep up all the great work.
All righty. Thank you very much, guys. And until then, have a great one. Bye.